This is Jake Adams, CEO at Simplify EDU.
And I'm Danielle Griggs, a tutor coordinator at Simplify EDU, and you're listening to Educators at Heart.
This podcast is for parents and students interested in peering behind the curtain to get to know the authentic journey we're all on as students of life.
Every week, we'll interview a different educator we know so that they can share the unique experiences that have shaped their perspective on the most important things students should know on their journey to higher education. Let's get started. Hey listeners, before we begin, I just want to say a huge thank you to all of you for your support so far. Today launches our 12th episode, which is a little hard to believe, and it's been so exciting to share all of this with you. So for our episode today, I'm joined by another one of our incredible tutors here at Simplify EDU, Julia Herring. Julia recently graduated from Liberty University with a degree in mathematics and English and is currently pursuing her master's in mathematics at the University of North Carolina, Charlotte, where she is also working as an algebra and calculus teacher. Julia's approach to education is quite incredible, and I'm excited to have her share what she's learned with all of you. We'll be discussing understanding the why in education and how that makes such a huge difference in a student's educational journey and beyond. So, let's jump on in. So Julia, thanks so much for joining me today. To kind of kick things off, can you tell us, where are you originally from?
Yeah, I was born in Western Pennsylvania, but I grew up most of my life in Greensboro, North Carolina.
Okay, wonderful. So I'm originally from Pennsylvania, so I love that.
Oh, nice. Which part?
I'm more up in Erie, Pennsylvania, like on the Great Lake.
We lived there for a while.
Stop it.
Yep.
Oh my goodness. We're going to have to chat about that later. It's not every day you find another Erie, Pennsylvania person. I love it. So did you, this is a fun question that I love to ask some of our guests here is, did you have a favorite teacher growing up? It's always fun to kind of hear that perspective from, educators and tutors now thinking like, who was someone that maybe really inspired you? Like, if there were even a few, or if you just have one that really stands out, who was someone that was really meaningful to you?
Yeah, so since I was homeschooled, I don't really remember a lot of teachers from like elementary school before I was homeschooled, but I did have a professor in college who I loved. And one of the reasons I thought he was an amazing professor was he really tried to connect with the students, actually get to know us. He was there for us in our everyday problems as well as our educational problems. And one of the biggest things about him was that he didn't make me feel like I was dumb for asking a question. I didn't feel scared to ask him things. Like sometimes you can be scared to ask, especially professors who like know a lot. He never ever made any of us feel like that. So that's one of the reasons I really connected with him.
I love that. I think that's so huge. And yeah, like you said, especially in college where can be a little intimidating, especially early on. So can you tell us a little bit about your educational background and then kind of how you ended up choosing your focus of study in college?
Yeah. I went to private school all through elementary school, but starting in middle school, I was homeschooled all the way through 12th grade. So I started homeschool 6th grade, went all the way through, and I loved homeschooling. I loved that I was able to do the subjects that I enjoyed and really focus on them. So like I did every subject I obviously had to do to graduate. I didn't just skip stuff, but I was really able to focus in on math and English, which were the subjects that I really enjoyed. And doing this it helped me to figure out what I wanted to do in college because I tried everything. And once I realized, okay, I love English, I love math, I was able to really focus in on them and get farther in those classes than a lot of people do in high school. So it was able to help me really like solidify that I wanted to do those for the rest of my life, which was awesome.
Yeah, that is. So kind of focusing on math then, tell me a little bit about it for our audience. Julia, it's kind of her main focus here, like in tutoring especially. So tell me about kind of your background in math specifically. Like, was this something that you always enjoyed, or did that kind of come later for you? Or tell me about that.
Yeah, I remember always liking math, even when I was really young. I remember in kindergarten they made us do this thing like, "What's your favorite subject? What do you want to be when you grow up?" And I remember just writing math. And I don't even know
I
why.
want to be math.
Yes, I want to be math. And I was 5, so I have no clue why I even liked math that much at 5.
Yeah.
But then I remember starting to even feel a little bit frustrated with math as I got up through elementary school because we had these big classes. The teachers, couldn't get to everyone's level at the same time. So when I started being
Right.
homeschooled and I was able to go at my own pace and focus in on the topics that I enjoyed, I started to regain that love for math that maybe I had lost a
Mm-hmm.
little bit over the years.
Yeah.
And again, I really focused in on it. I remember I started being homeschooled, I went straight into pre-algebra and then just kept going through. I love the curriculum that I did as well. I think I did Saxon math for a while, which was an awesome curriculum. It
Mm-hmm.
really helped to like solidify all of the concepts that I was learning.
Yeah.
And I do remember my parents would not let me move on to the next lesson until I like got every single problem right in the
Yeah.
textbook. So I had to redo it over and over and over again. So I just basically spent my entire day doing math all day, redoing it until
Yeah.
I got a perfect score.
Wow.
And
Wow.
so yeah, I just loved it.
That's awesome. So, today for kind of our focus here is we're discussing the importance of understanding the why in education.
Hmm.
So, kind of like having those connections made and explained to really better the understanding of a concept, which I know is something that you've mentioned you're passionate about. So, I guess, was this something that was demonstrated for you in your own educational background, or was it something that you kind of had to discover on your own?
Yeah, I would say maybe a little bit of both. Like I
Okay.
said, my parents did make me, like, they really made me understand each lesson before I moved to the next one. I wasn't allowed to use outside resources. I wasn't even allowed to use a
Hmm.
calculator, I think, until I got to like calculus,
Yeah.
even to do like basic multiplication, which they knew I knew how to do. And again, I was not allowed to pass to the next lesson until I got, I think, essentially a perfect score. So
Okay,
I
yeah.
had to really understand the math. I couldn't just write down whatever on the page and pass with even like a 80 or whatever. I had to
Right.
really understand each concept before I was even allowed to go to the next one, which, as a kid, you're kind of like, oh, whatever, roll your eyes. Oh, your parents just tell you have to do it. So I
Yeah.
don't think I really truly understood it until I got to 11th grade. And I
Mm,
took calculus at the community college. I took Calc 2 at the community college. And my professor was, at least the way he taught, I didn't really enjoy it. He just kind of threw problems at us and was like,
okay.
okay, do them. And with Calc 2, it's very different from every other math you've done up to that point because they start
Mm,
to introduce some newer concepts. And for me, it was like just throwing those problems at me and not explaining why or how made
mm,
no sense. I ended up
yeah.
resorting to just memorization to pass the tests because I didn't get it. But then I retook it in college because I wanted to really make sure I was on track with how the way my college did things.
Yeah.
And my teacher actually explained the reasonings behind those concepts that made no sense to me. And I
Yeah.
immediately understood why we used the formulas we used. And I actually like had that realization of, oh, memorization and understanding are completely different. And when you understand it, it's actually so much easier. So
Yeah.
I had it demonstrated to me, but I don't think I fully grasped it until I actually experienced lacking in understanding.
Right. Yeah, that's fascinating. So for, talking about math specifically, like how do you feel like this approach really impacted your understanding and even more so maybe your appreciation of the subject? You said that you felt like it spurred that, but how do you feel like it maybe changed that for you?
Yeah. So when I think the difference between memorization and understanding is honestly, it's very significant because when you understand the formula, like even with computational math, when you understand what's going on, I feel like you almost no longer have to truly memorize because if you understand why you have to add in a specific formula, why you have to multiply, or why you're using a certain constant or a certain variable, it just like
Right.
it makes sense. So I think that the understanding really takes away from the difficulty of math in a lot of
Mm,
ways because you no longer have to memorize as much because you understand what is going on, you understand why you're doing what you're doing. So I
yeah.
think that that understanding really helped me to recognize why I was using certain formulas when I had to use them. And that's something I noticed with a lot of students is they'll have a formula and they'll tell me, I don't know how to use it. I don't know when to use it. No one told
Hmm.
me why I'm using this formula. And I have to
Right.
explain that to them. They just, no one tells them. And so they
Hmm.
don't understand what they're doing at all because they don't know why they're using specific formulas. So
Yeah.
I think it plays a huge role in even just understanding the math.
Definitely. So, yeah, let's talk about that a little bit. Like students who are out there and educators who are teaching math. And so, I guess tell me about your thoughts on educators kind of taking this approach to teaching math and what impacts you think that they could maybe see on their students' understanding and even just interest in this specific subject. I feel like math sometimes can have this scariness around it for a lot of students. And so how do you feel like that could change maybe the overall interest for students?
Yeah, exactly. I think that most students, at least the ones I've experienced, are terrified of math. And what I've noticed is they're scared of it because either it's just presented as a ton of facts they have to memorize. Like when
Mm,
they're older, in algebra, their teachers give you them all these complicated formulas and they're just told, memorize them, apply them. And like I
yeah.
said, they don't know when to do it, why they're doing it. And so they get frustrated even with like repetition of practice, like, okay, this is the formula we need to use. We need to do it on this equation. And we do like 10 problems. They're still not getting it. And I can
Yeah.
see the frustration growing. I think that if teachers started explaining, even like they don't have to go really in depth, but even just this is why we're using the formula, this is how we get this formula, they're going to see their students not only knowing when to apply them, how to apply them, they're also going to see the students not being as scared of it. And when you're not scared of it, you're actually able to enjoy it. I think students aren't able to
Right.
enjoy math because they're scared of it. It's frustrating to them. They feel like no matter what they do, they just can't get it. And it's not even really their fault because all they're being told is use this, memorize this formula and use it.
Yeah.
And they don't know why. So it's not even their fault that they're frustrated and can't do it
Hmm.
because they're just not being given what they need.
Yeah, absolutely. And it kind of just becomes gut through it
Hmm.
until you get out of it. And
Yep.
and it is, it's unfortunate because there is so much practical use of so many of
Hmm.
the skills that they're learning. But just, yeah, I love that. So we'll kind of pivot. Tell us, so actually, for our audience, Julia double majored in math and also writing. So I know you've mentioned that these two actually go hand in hand really well, which I guess maybe some people might not see how those even intersect at all. So can you tell us more about that double major and tell us about kind of that how you see those two subjects kind of working together and intersecting?
Yeah, and honestly, I didn't really see it either. I never didn't see that connection until I really got into it. The reason I even started a double major was just because I enjoyed writing. I've always been a huge reader, so I
Yeah.
loved English, and I did love math as well, and I was able to go and get it done in 4 years. So I was like, might as well do the two
Yeah.
things I like, get it done in my 4 years, and go on with my life. But then I got into math. And of course, we start off computational with math. So, like,
Mm.
algebra, calculus. But I think what a lot of people don't realize about math, because it's not taught in high school, is that what a math major really is it's mostly proofwriting. So, like,
Mm.
explaining why things happen, understanding how we got these formulas that we're even using in computational math. And proofwriting is kind of, to me, it's like a story. And I've
Yeah.
even explained this to my math teachers because they like would make fun of me, like, "Oh, you're an English major, you know, that's like easy stuff." And I was like, "Well, no, it's not really as easy as you think." When you're writing a proof, you have to connect all of the definitions, the theorems that you're
Mm.
learning, as well as the computational stuff that you know from past classes. So you have a lot of information that you're trying to piece together. And I think it's very similar to when you're trying to write an essay, like if you're writing an argumentative essay about a some storyline that you read, some plot line, you're trying to argue something about a book, you have to piece together the historical context, you have to piece together what happened in the book. You have to look at other
Yeah.
people's analysis of the book. You have a lot of information that you're piecing together to make a coherent paper that actually, makes sense,
Yeah.
checks out, all of the pieces have to work together. You can't just throw in random facts. You're not going to get a
Right.
good grade on your paper. It's the same thing with the proof. You have to use the correct theorems, you have to understand the definitions, you have to put things together in an order that makes sense. Otherwise, you're just writing nonsense. So
Yeah.
I think that my skills in writing helped me with proofwriting once I got into those upper level classes. And my
Interesting.
ability to critically think and put that together the proofs, which are very difficult usually, and you have to really like understand each of the theorems and definitions, helps me to write better because I am quicker at putting concepts together and I'm quicker at analyzing things. So I
Mm.
think they go hand in hand, but most people don't see that because you don't have proofreading classes in high school. So it's
Right.
hard to see that connection. But even in
Yeah.
general, critical thinking in math helps with the critical thinking in English.
Yeah, right. It's a general skill that can be applied in so many ways.
Mm,
Yeah, that's excellent. So I kind of talking about that a little bit more, like some long-term benefits. Like what would you say are some of the long-term benefits? Kind of thinking like out, post school, future adulthood,
mm.
career, some of those long-term benefits to students taking this more holistic approach to their education, like making sure they go beyond just rote memorization and understand the reasons and real-world application for what they're learning.
Yes. So, like I said, I think that math really fosters critical thinking. I
Mm,
think that if you're able to truly understand why you use a formula, how the different concepts go together, you're able to critically think because doing math, I think, is one of the hardest subjects. I think that truly understanding math requires you to really, really think about what is going on. You can't really just get away with it by
hmm.
memorization, like we said. So if you're able to critically think, and I hear this from students all the time, why am I learning this? Why do I care the why? Like I've heard that specifically.
Yeah.
Why do I care about why I'm doing it if I can just get through with memorization and then never do it
Yeah.
again? And I say, it's because that ability to critically think will help you in any area of your life. If you go to be a history major, you're able to critically think and analyze the different reasons behind specific historical acts like wars or
Hmm.
treaties, anything like that. Same thing with English, like I just explained. You're able to critically think and understand stories better, write a good paper. And math is really in everything. I think that math
Yeah.
is in basically every subject in the world. It's how we get most sciences, physics,
Hmm.
chemistry, biology, maths, and all of that. Math is a huge part of history, really. And you might not see that as much because that's not like a main thing they're teach in history class. But
Yeah.
math really is a huge thing in history. I've even actually seen that in English class. I was able to make some really cool connections and write some cool papers because I would
Wow.
pick out like a small part of math history in my
Yeah.
English history, and I was able to write about that. So that was actually really cool. But
How cool.
math is everywhere. It's in the structure of the world. And when you're
Hmm.
able to appreciate math, you're able to appreciate the things around you a little bit better
Mm.
in ways that you maybe never saw. You're able to see the world in a new way. And honestly, I just think math is really cool. So I think that if you're able to understand it, you're able to have a lot more joy in a subject that normally you would have probably no joy in. So it just kind of makes you
Yeah.
happier in general, less stressed about school, and gives you a more positive attitude towards school in
Hmm.
general because you have less classes that you just like kind of despise. I see that with students a lot. They say,
Yeah.
"Oh, what's your favorite subject? What's your least favorite subject?" And almost always their like least favorite subject is math. I hate it. I wish I didn't have to do it.
Yeah.
And I think having that attitude towards school kind of can bring you down a little bit, can make you feel
Hmm.
a little bit discouraged. So I think in general it can contribute to overall happiness and positive attitude toward education.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. I love it. That's excellent. Just really good perspective there. So, kind of talking now more to parents specifically. For parents whose students, maybe they have students who struggle with motivation, like you
Mm.
mentioned, just in school and their education, just don't really feel it, don't like it. It's a struggle. What are some ways that you feel like this approach to understanding the why in education could help and maybe make a difference for those students? And I know you mentioned a little bit there, but
Mhm.
anything else that you want to add, to parents specifically to encourage them to take this approach with students and how it might bring some additional motivation?
Yeah. So I think that students who lack motivation, and I guess it does depend on how old the student is, what level the student's at, or what level the student's at. But I think that students who lack motivation really need to try to understand these concepts because, like I said, it'll bring them more joy and it will actually help them in future classes. I think that was one of my big motivators. And of course, it depends on the
Mm,
student. Every student's different. But when I realized that if I don't understand my math in sixth grade, I'm not going to understand my math in 12th grade. It's just
right.
going to get harder. So like I said, so every student is different. I think that realizing that math is going to get harder and that it's just going to become more of a struggle should be a big motivator for a lot of students and parents because I know it's difficult for students to struggle and I know it's difficult for
Hmm.
parents to see their kids struggling. That's
Yeah.
another thing I hear from parents is like they they're upset because they can see their kid struggling, they can see their kid working so hard and just losing that motivation and it's just like
Hmm.
heartbreaking to the parents.
Yeah.
And I I think that the student understanding will turn the student's perspective around, which will make them happier, which will really help kind of just in general their family atmosphere.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I know, I guess I already kind of talked about it a little bit, but just that critical thinking will help them in every area of school. So I think that
Mm-hmm.
it's just really important that students learn to enjoy the understanding behind math, even if they don't realize that it really will help them in their future and future math and just every aspect of their educational future.
Yeah, definitely. Well, before we kind of wrap up here, we always like to ask our guests to give us we call it our simplified lessons. So basically, like if you had to simplify maybe one or two of the most important lessons that you've learned in your own life as kind of a student of life that you wouldn't mind sharing to help, others learn those lessons maybe a little more quickly, what what would that be?
I think my biggest thing, and it does apply to education, but it also applies to life in general, is not obsessing over being perfect at everything. And I think that there's a lot of pressure on kids nowadays, especially in education, but just in life, that they want to be the best in their activity. They want to
Right.
be the best like kid that they can be, the best child that they can be. They don't want to make their parents upset at them. They don't want anyone to be disappointed in them. That's something I struggled with a lot as a kid, is I felt like everything I was going to do was going to disappoint someone. I felt like if I didn't get the perfect grade, I was going to disappoint my teacher, disappoint my parents, not be a good example for my younger siblings. And as I got older, I realized that being perfect does not define you, but trying your best genuinely does define you. And
Mm.
I recognized that when I took a class and I was used to being the straight A student, and I started really, really struggling in the class. I was getting bad grades on my tests. I was trying so hard, and no matter what I did, I just could not get a better grade. And I realized that that wasn't a big deal. It wasn't as big of a
Mm.
deal as I made it out to be. And I was able to work harder and get a good grade in the class. But in the end, what I got out of it wasn't the grade, it was the learning experience, which
Mm.
was awesome. So I think that the bigger thing is not to obsess over how good you do, how well you perform, but to pay attention to the lessons that each experience teaches you and how you can grow from that, because everyone can always grow. You might not be
Yeah.
perfect, but what you should really focus on is how you can grow, not how you can be perfect in
Mm-hmm.
every area of life.
Yeah. Wow. Well, thank you so much, Julia. This has been so insightful. I just love hearing your perspective, from someone too who it's not that long ago that you were having to navigate all this for yourself, So I
Hmm.
love that. I think it's just such a great perspective for parents to be able to kind of take and to kind of share with their students. And so thank you so much for joining me today. It was just a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This was awesome.
Thanks so much for listening.
If you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to subscribe to our show for future episodes. See you next time.